HTML is used to add the element within a page. So for example, if you want to create a document and insert some sort of element, so for example, this navigation or links, images, depending on the element you want to insert. In this case, you need to use HTML. Let's just open the inspector. And if we take a look here on the header, see that I have a header here, which include a navigation and some links within. So all of that is used to navigate through website. So what I'm explaining here that HTML is just used for the structure of the document. And if I go here and I remove the CSS file, search for CSS. Now I have a tag here or an element which define that will link a CSS file to this HTML document right here. Now I have this style.css and this link element. If I delete it, okay, let's just delete this element. Now the style is changing. I have no styling applied on this document, which means that HTML is just for the structure. And if we take a look here, you'll see that we have some images element, links. So this is the list of articles and this is the structure of the HTML. In general, if you want to create the style, the first thing to do is we need to create a style. Okay, let's just search for CSS again. We need to create the style sheet, style.css, depending on the name you want to use. Then use this link tag in order to link this document to a CSS file. And to summarize all of that, an HTML document include at first the raw HTML. So this is just a simple example, and we have an index.html page. Once you link this HTML document to a CSS file that will create separately, so we'll have as a result a styled HTML document. And this is just a simple example of two elements that are styled on this result. And what we did exactly is we create an index.html page and link it to a style.css in order to have a styled result. I have here an HTML page and this is the preview. And if I add an element, okay, let's just go for heading, H1, I go for hello world. Then if I save that and inspect this element from the browser, so this is the result of this HTML code. Now I have a default style. So this display block and font size, I don't define anything from this HTML page. And this is a default style applied by the browser. So this is the Google Chrome browser. If I open the same link on Firefox, okay, let's just open that. So you see that I have the same result. And if I inspect the element from Firefox, so I don't think that Firefox shows the default style, but in general, in this case, I have the same style applied, even if I'm not defining and using any CSS within the HTML page. Okay, let's just add another thing here or another element. I go for a link, then click here, find this element, select it. And this is what they have. So the color is applied, the cursor and text decoration, all of these properties are CSS properties that you can use in order to style the HTML element. I can also go for a list, UL, and add two elements, for example, home and services. So this is just an example, services. Save that. Now, as you see here, I have this bullet points. Even if I'm not defining that from the CSS, and they have a margin and padding, and all of that is defined as default style. So depending on the element you are including within the page. Same here, if I open Firefox again and pass the link, I have this UL, I have this bullet point from the list without even using CSS. Okay, let's just move to our code. I can add any element and it depends on the element you add. Okay, let's just add nav and see if there is any default style applied. So I have this display block by default. And if you want to just force the CSS or this default CSS, you need to add your own CSS. So for example, you can create a CSS file, or so it depends on the way you are including CSS in this HTML page. But in general, this default style is just applied by the browser, depending on the browser you are using. Maybe if you use another browser, so the results can be a little bit different. So it depends on the engine the browser is using. But all the browser has a default style which will be applied on an HTML document. I have an HTML page here and this is the preview. And what I want to achieve is I want to just style this HTML page by changing the background of the body to black and change this link to green. And to do that, I have three solutions. So the first one is by using align CSS. Second one is using internal CSS. And the third one, or the last one, is external. And as I already said, I want to change the background color to black of this body element. And I want to change the link color to green. So this link, I want it to be green. Okay, let's just go for the first solution, which is align CSS. For the first solution, you need to use the attributes on the element you want to style. So for example, I want to change the background of this body to black. So for that, I add this style here attributes, and we'll add the CSS property as a value of the style attributes, and I will go for background, then black. Save that. Refresh the page and the background is changed. For the next one, I have this link that I want to change it to green. Same here, I'll add the style attribute. Then for the value of styles will be color green. Now if I refresh the page, the style of the link is changed into green and the style of the body still black. Now first solution is done. Align CSS. Okay, let's just remove all of that. Now we'll move to the next one, which is internal CSS. How to create internal CSS. So instead of using the style attributes, let's just remove that. I will remove the style from both the body and, body, not body. Then remove style from the link, save that, refresh the page. Now we have no style. So for that, I need to add a style tag or style element within the body. Now I have the style tag. Now I need to select the element that I want to change its background. So for that, I will go for body. Now I'll go for background black. Save that. Okay, let's just go for the next one. I have also a link that I want to change it to green, and the link is the E element. So I will go deeper into how to do that. But I'm just giving you an example on how to style a page or how to link an HTML page to CSS. Now I want to change the color to green. Save that, refresh the page. Okay, this is the second solution. So I changed the style of the body and also of the link by using an internal styling by adding the style tag within the body, and I add the CSS. Okay, now let's just move to the last one, which is external CSS. How to style this HTML page by using external CSS. And by external CSS, I mean that I need to add a CSS file. Okay, let's just go for that. I create a new file and I'll go for style.css. Okay, I will not add a style. Let's just link the example.html page to the style.css. Okay, for that, we have this link element. Now we use this attributes rel and style sheet as the value, and the value of each ref should be this file. So for example, I have the style.css file. Okay, and the style.css file is at the same level of example.html. But for example, if you have the CSS folder, so you can include the CSS file within the CSS folder. Then instead of style.css, you should add the CSS. Okay, I'll refresh the page. So we have no style here. Now let's just add some properties, some CSS properties within the style.css to style the body to black and the link to green. And for that, I will go for body to select the element that I want to change its background. Now I'll go for background and black. Save that, refresh the page. So we have black here, and I'll go for the A or the link so that I want to change its color to green. I'll go for color green. Okay, refresh the page and we change the style of this page. So we go through 3 examples on how to link an HTML page to CSS. We go to this one when we create an external file, the style.css, and we'll go for the previous one when we create internal styling and we add the CSS within the HTML page. And for the last one, we add the style attributes to change the style of the document. What do we have here is an HTML page, and we need to change the color of this link. Click here to green. So the first thing to do is I need to link this HTML document to a CSS file, and I will create a link here. Then I'll add a new file, style.css. Okay, let's just add the file because it doesn't exist. Okay, I'll go for a new file, style.css. Now, let's just go for the basic terminology on how to just change this link color to green. So the first thing to do from the CSS file is to select the element. And the element here is a link. So we have this E tag. So this E tag is considered as an element within this HTML page. And to select an element by using CSS, we use the selector name. The selector name in our case is A. Then we open the curly braces and we close the curly braces. And what we will include within this curly braces are the properties or the CSS properties that will be used in order to change the style. The user property to change the color link is color. then this property needs a value. So in our case, I will go for green. Okay, save that. And what do we have as a result is we use, this is the selector. So this is the basic terminology on how to write CSS. We have, this is the selector. We select the E element, then so in red. So I just use red for the selector. Then we have a declaration. So all of that is considered as a declaration. This color green is considered as a declaration. And each declaration needs a property and a value. So this is the property, and we use this colon and value of the property. So the value of color is green. It can be other colors. For example, you can go for pink or any other color, and we'll learn how to use all of that. But what to take from that is the basic terminology on how to write CSS. We first select the element, then we put the declaration, and the declaration includes the property and the value of this property. We have also here two important symbols. The first one is the assignment symbol, which is used to assign a value to this property. So to assign a value green to the property color, we use this assignment right here. And for the other symbol here is the semicolon. And the semicolon is used to define the end of the declaration. If we want to add another declaration, for example, I will go for a font size and I will give it a 12 pixel as a value. So we add the property. This is the property and this is the value of this property. We use the colon as an assignment symbol to assign 12 pixel to font size. Then we use the semicolon to define that this is the end of the second declaration. So we just separate two declarations by using the semicolon. Let's refresh the page to see the changes. And the curly braces are used to wrap all of the styles that will be used in order to change the style of this element. So the selector here, then we use the curly braces, and the curly braces wrap each declaration that will be used in order to change the style of this element. If you want to go for another element, so for example, let's just go for a heading or go for a hello, for example. And if I want to change the style to each one heading, so I will go for the selector, then I'll add the curly braces and add a style, for example, color green. We'll go for red, save that, refresh the page, and I have a heading, hello, which is using the color red. So now I have two elements. The first one is this one, A, and this is of the style applied for this E tag. And for the second one, let's just use another color. So this tag right here, or this curly braces, will wrap the style that will be used for this specific element, each one. So we have an HTML page and you want to change, for example, the style of this H1 element. So this HTML page has three articles. So this has title 1, title 2, and title 3. And to change the style of these titles, we can just select the element each one in our case, and this is considered as the type selector. So we select the element each one and we change the color to red. And if I save that and refresh the page, you see that the title 1 is changed and also title 2 and title 3. So what means that the style.css, when I'm defining this each one right here, just find out all the each ones within this document and change their color to red. Okay, just I'm selecting any each one within the document and changing its color to red. Now, what if I want to just define a specific style for this title 2 and I don't want to use this color red for this title 2 right here? So for that, we can use an attributes class and give it a name. So for example, for this title 2, I will give it a class attributes. Then I will go, for example, for green title. So this class here is an attribute, so that can help us to define some specific styling that only need to be used for any element that has a class attributes and a green title value. And to use this green title from the style.css, you just need to use a dot, then the name of the class, and just open the curly braces and put any style you want. So for example, I will go for color green, save that, refresh the page. So the result is green for title 2, which means that I'm defining here that any element use this class green title, so it will be green, not only for heading, but any element that will have the same class green title, so it will be green. So let's just copy that and put it in this paragraph right here. Refresh the page, you will see that green is also applied on this paragraph. But if you want to just limit this green title to the headings, so in this case, you just need to go to the CSS page and define each one here, each one. Now it will only select any each one within the page instead of anything. Now if I'm refreshing the page, the paragraph, no, it's not green. Even if I go here and let's just return this green title within the paragraph. So I will use the class green title for this paragraph, refresh the page, and the paragraph is not green. Why? Because I'm defining from the CSS that any element that have this green titles class plus it should be an each one. And if I want to just put it as a global one, I just need to remove this each one. Now if I refresh the page, the paragraph is also green. So without using the each one or without using the element before the class name, so it will be global. But once you use any element within the green title, you are just specifying that you want this specific element or any specific element that use the green title should take this style and apply them. Okay, now we have also another attribute, and this other attribute is ID. So for example, if I go for this article right here and I use the ID name article1. So this ID attribute, which can also help you to select a specific element within the document and change its style. And to denote this article1 from the style.css, you need to use this, you need to denote it by using the letter number symbol and the name of the ID. Okay, now you can put any style. So for example, I will go for background gray. Now I'm using an ID for this article1, but the specificity of ID, it doesn't have to be repeated. So for example, if I'm creating an ID with the value article1 for this tag right here, so I can't repeat the same ID on the next one. So for example, if I go for this article here and I put an article1, you should avoid this kind of situation because an ID should not be repeated. So in our case, you should just change this 1 to 2 or any other name, but the name shouldn't be repeated. It's not like a like class when you can repeat the same name, so the ID should not be repeated. Okay, now let's just remove that. Save that and refresh the page, and you see that the background gray is applied on this article1. So the class, as I already said, so can be repeated, but the ID cannot be repeated. There is another thing for naming classes. If you use a space, it will be considered as multiple classes. This is a class name and this is another one. We have two classes right here. So avoid that because you want to create only one class and not multiple ones. If you want to add another class, for example, and I will go for size as just an example. So the size class should be created as a separate one. Then you can apply any style within this font size. For example, I will go for font size 12 pixels. Now, if I refresh the page, you see that 12 pixels is applied and also the style of green title. So we have multiple classes in this case. So we have this green title and also size. So be aware of that. So when you are using space, you will create multiple classes. But for the ID, you can't create multiple ID. So using this format isn't correct at all. Using any other ID within this ID value isn't correct at all. So the ID name is always identical and shouldn't be repeated. To use one name within the ID value, or you only have to use one name within the ID value. Let's first analyze the semantic of this document. We have the global parent of this element within the document, which is body. But in our case, we want access to this heading inside the article in order to change the style. Article in this case is the parent. It is the parent that wrap all of the siblings. So the siblings in our case are heading, paragraph, and UL. So the title and the paragraph and the unordered list, they are at the same level and they are considered as siblings of this article parent. Okay, I'm using yellow here. So in order to just differentiate between siblings, parent, and at the end we have the children. So the children in our case are list items. So this unordered list is considered here as the parent of this list items. So if you want to access to any element within the article, we should go in a descending way. If you want to, for example, change the color of this heading right here, we need it to go in an ascending way. If you take a look here, you see that this is an article. Okay, this is the tag article, which is considered the parent, the heading, and the paragraph, and the unordered list. They are at the same level. I'm using yellow. Then we have the children, which are the list of items. To match the descending element, in our case, we want to change the color of this heading inside the article. So the first thing we'll start with the parent from the CSS. Okay, we'll go and use article. Then we add a space. So the space, then the element or the sibling, in our case, heading. And I open the curly braces and I add the color green. Save that. And as you see, so the article title or the heading is changing the color. So the space here is defining that this H1 right here is a sibling of article. So you don't have to remove the space. So if you just remove the space, it will be considered as the one selector. But in our case, if you use the selector article, then a space plus this heading. So in this case, you are just accessing to a sibling of this article. If you want to go to another sibling, so for example, this paragraph, and change its color to red. So in this case, you can use article, then paragraph. Don't forget the space. Open the curly braces and change the color to red. Save that. So it's changing to red. So to access to any sibling, the first thing to do is you need to use the parent, then use the sibling. If you remove article, so it will apply a color green. So save that. So you see that green is still here. But the problem is that each one will be applied. It will be considered as a global. So any each one, for example, even if it's outside of article, so it will take the color. So let's just save that. But this is not what I want. So what I want exactly is change the color of any heading within the article. And this is why we wrap the heading sibling within the article parent. Okay, let's just return to article H1. Good. You can also access the children by going from parent to a children. So in this case, we have one sibling, which is the unordered list, then the children, which is the list of items. So for example, if we want to change this list right here, change the background of this list right here to gray. Okay. So the first thing, we should start from the parent, then we go to this unordered list, which is the sibling, then the children. Okay, let's just write the CSS code. So the first thing, article, which is the parent, add a space to define the first sibling, which is the unordered list. And if we add a space here, means that I'm going deeper into the children, which is the list of item. Okay, let's just write li, open the curly braces. If we take a look at this tree, you see that we have article as a parent and the UL, which is a sibling. So they are at the same level. So I'm using space to access in deeper from the parent. Now change the background color to gray. I'll go to gray, save that. And the list of items are changed into gray. In the previous video, we learned how to access to a sibling, paragraph, and heading of a parent by using a space. When you are using space to separate selectors, means that you are accessing to a sibling of a parent. But in this video, we'll learn how to group multiple selectors. Okay, what I mean by grouping multiple selectors. So the two siblings, each one and the paragraph, they share the same style, color green. You can combine them by using one group. So in this case, to group this article paragraph and article H1, so I will use, let's just copy that, article paragraph, then use comma, let's just comment that, save that, and you see that I have a color green here at the paragraph and the heading. They are siblings of the article, so I'm just combining them because they share the same style. So the style will be applied in both of them. And this result right here is the same as, okay, let's just add article, each one, color green. And because they share the same style, we just create groups instead of repeating the same code. These groups that we create, article H1 or article paragraph, they are not related. You are not obligated to use this article of the parent and the siblings. You are free to use any selector and group them so they can share the same style. In our example, we have a link, click here, and we want it to be green, or any link within the document you want it to be green. So in this case, they share the same style, and we can add comma, then the selector E, which means that any link within this document will be green. So we use an element which it is not related to the other ones. It doesn't have the same parent. You are free to use the selectors that they share the same styles. Okay, to summarize, we use space to access the sending element, and we use comma to group multiple selectors. And when you group multiple selectors, they are not related, they are independent. We have an HTML page that has some elements, and each element can use a specific pseudo class. Okay, what is exactly a pseudo class? It is a keyword so that can be used in order to change the state of a specific element. So for example, if we have an element A and you want to change, when I hover over an element, I want to change the color to red. There is a state for that, and to add a state to an element, use the colon, then the name of the state. So you see here from the autocomplete, I have multiple ones. I have, for example, hover in a range. And I have multiple ones, so that can be used depending on the use case. But in general, when I want to hover over an element, I want to change the color to red. Okay, I have a hover color red. So this is the state, and I'm changing the color to red. Now, if I hover over the element, the color is changing to red. I can go for green. Now, if I hover over the element, it's green. So you can use the same state for any element. Let's just go for the paragraph and change it to green when I hover over the element. Now, if I hover over P, so you see that the color is changing to green. So there are multiple ones. And if we take a look on this link right here, so you see that we have a list of states that we can use in any element within our HTML document. If you want to take a look to how to activate a state without even hovering over an element, okay, let's just return here to A, hover, and I open the inspector. So let's just select the element A, then click on Hover, and we have some list of states. Not all of them, but the most used one. Now, if I click or if I check hover, you see that the color is changing to green. I'm simulating hover without even using the mouse. If I'm using visited or active or focus for my code, it will display the code that I'm using. And if we take a look here, when I check hover, the color or the code is just showing me the hover. Let's just uncheck it. I don't have the code right here. When I'm using hover, it shows me the style that I'm using for this specific element and this specific state. So to create or to summarize all of that, you can add the state to any element, not only for this A. So you can use hover or any other state for any other element. And the other thing here is if you want to add the pseudo class, you just need to add this colon, then the name of the state. So the syntax is the selector, then the pseudo class. So the first thing to learn here is why we should use comments. So for example, this is a code. So when I have a button, so for example, I have this btn class. So I have two selectors that I'm using, and I have also using table. We should guide ourselves, and also anyone will work on the same file in the future that this part of code is doing something, or this piece of code is doing something, or this line, for example, if it's a hack. For example, I'm using this background here as a hack for a specific browser. We use comments so in order to guide ourselves and anyone that will work in this file in the future. If you are collaborating on the same file, you should guide and give some notes about a part of the code or a specific line. So now let's just move to the next question. How to write a comment. To write a comment is straightforward. You just need to write the syntax. So the slash, then asterisk, and we put the comment inside here, and we have after we finish the comment, so we have the asterisk and slash. So you can put your content here, which means that I'm giving an idea on so that this piece of code, it is a button. So for example, I use button here, and I can put that in multi-lines. So you are free to add multi-lines or any content. If you want to just give it some style, you can add some asterisks right here, so it doesn't affect the comment. You can add any other symbol, so you don't have to use asterisks. Let's just use, for example, this syntax, the symbol right here. Okay, you just give it some style, and this is how we write multi-line comments. If you want to, for example, I'll just copy that and put it before table, which means that I'm organizing my code so that the first part is for buttons and the second part is for table. So I'm just giving an idea for myself and for anyone who will work on this file that these are two separate files and each one is for a specific UI. Okay, now if I want, for example, tell someone that I'm using this margin right here, So as a hack for Internet Explorer 10 or whatever, so you can, for example, use a single line comment, okay, by writing the syntax and tell him that this is an hack for IA6. So I'm sure that this is an old way, but I'm just showing you if you want to just, no one is working now with IA6, but I'm just showing you that. But in general, so if you want to create a single line comment, you just need to write it like that in one line. And by writing comments, as I already said, you're just telling yourself and anyone who will work in your file in the future. Maybe you are working on an open source project and you need to give people some guidance that this part of the code is for buttons, or so it can be a little bit complex when you are dealing with CSS. But in general, if you are working in some complex programming languages, when you are working on some features, comments are super important. But even for CSS, sometimes you are working in a complex user interface and you want to tell people, so this part of the code is doing something, and by doing that, so the first thing is not only comment, but also you need to write an organized code and a well-written CSS code. But to support all of that, you just need to add comments to give a better or a clear idea on what your code is doing. So for example, if I want to change the background color of the body element, and by the body element, I mean, so this white color, I want to change it. So this is the body element. I want to change the color to another color instead of using this white. So for that, I will select the body and then I will use the background property, which will help me to change the background color of this specific element, which is body. So I have three ways, or I have three solutions. So the first one is by using a keyword color. And by keyword color, I mean you can use red on yellow. So I'm not here defining this keyword. They are already defined by the language. I can use brown or I can use green, and there are multiple ones. But the problem is, what if I want to use a lighter color, a lighter green color or a darker green? So for that, I need to use another format, not this simple one, not this one, which is a keyword. I need to use another presentation, which is an EFGB presentation or hexadecimal. Okay, let's just start with the first one. The first one is the EFGB presentation. So this is a function. I'm not creating this function. This is a CSS function, which will help you to just change the color of the body of any element by specifying some values. And this EFGB is just, this is red, green, and blue. And the minimum values that you can put, we have three values separated by comma. And the minimum value is 1, 1, and 1. Sorry, not 1, but 0, 0, and 0. Now, if I save that, you will see that this is black. If you put three zeros here separated by comma, so it just means that this is a black. This is a black presentation, or this is the EFGB presentation of the black color. And the maximum one is 255, 255, and 255. Now I'm using the white color. Now, what if I want to have another color? So from VS Code or Visual Studio Code, I have this palette here, which when I can navigate through colors, and the value of red, green, and blue is changing depending on the color that I want to use. Now, for example, if I'm going to the darker color, you see that the value is changing, and the FGB, now I have a new presentation, and this presentation is helping me to get into any color that I want to change. Okay, and the other interesting thing when you are using the FGB presentation, if you want to just reduce the opacity of a specific color, so it will just add another pop. Now we have 1, 2, 3 for FGB, air, red, green, and blue, and the third one is for the opacity. If you want to just reduce the lightness of the color, reduce the opacity, if I'm just putting 1, so 0.1 means that I'm going into the lighter color, and if I'm just using 1, I just keep the color without reducing the opacity, and I can just reduce that by 0.1 if I go 0.9 or 0.7, so until 0. So 0 means nothing, but if you just want to decrease the opacity of a specific color, you just need to add a specific value. But if you are not interested with that, just keep the format of the color like that. Now let's just move to the other, let's just move to the other presentation. We have, as I already said, the FGB presentation, okay, which has 3 values. Now save that. We have the FGBA presentation. The last one can be for the opacity. Then we add a value 0.4 as an example, and just to reduce the opacity. And for the last one, we have the hexadecimal. So the hexadecimal presentation. And for example, let's just save that and use only FGB. And if I hover over that, and I can change the value to an hexadecimal value. When I'm clicking here, when I'm using Visual Studio Code, it changed the format of the code. Now I'm using another presentation, and this presentation is a hexadecimal presentation. And it starts with the symbol right here. Then we put a hexadecimal code, and you don't have to memorize all of that. So there are some tools that help you to get you into a specific hexadecimal color. Let's just go, for example, for green. Now we are changing the color, and you are free. So this hexadecimal presentation is also, it's shorter than the FGB, and so feel free to use any format that you like. But in general, so if you want to just go to FGB, you just need to click here, then click on FGB, and you have an FGB presentation of this color. So let's just duplicate that. Yeah, copy that. And for this color right here, the presentation, this is the hexadecimal presentation, and this is the FGB presentation. Without going into the details of typography, because it is a specialty and there are some people who they only have this focus, they focus on typography and how it works, I will try to be brief. So web typography is the appearance of text within a web browser. And typefaces are a set or a group of fonts, so they have some specific characteristics. And we have a list of ones. We have serif, sans serif, monospace, decorative, and script. Each font has some specific characteristic. So for example, if I go here on Google Fonts, okay, let's just go Google Fonts, and I'll try to find out, so this typefaces. Okay, let's just go here to the search. And as you see here, I have serif, sans serif, display, handwriting. So handwriting, so it is like script. So script and handwriting, they are the same. And for the script ones, or the script typefaces of the script, okay, let's just uncheck all of that, and I will just keep handwriting. So they are like handwritten. So hand letters. So we have hand letters for each character. And let's just go for the serif. And for the serif, we have a decorative lines. So we have this decorative lines here. So for example, for this Merriweather font, so we have this decorative lines. On each font, if I go to the other ones, you will find out that we have this decorative lines. And if I just go to the search again, then check that and go for the sans serif. And for the sans serif, we don't have the decorative lines like on the serif category or on the serif typefaces. Okay, so to summarize all of that without going into the details on each one, so each category here, each category on the typefaces, so just follow have some characteristics. And this is why we have these typefaces, just to regroup every font in a specific category. So now that we have an idea about web typography and typefaces, now what is exactly a font? So a font is just like a file. And if you just want to use the specific characters in your machine, you just need to download this font and start using it. Now, how to use that on CSS? So to use a specific font on your website, so for example, let's just move here to the HTML page, and you want to, for example, use a specific type of typefaces for this specific file, and to be rendered in the browser. So for that, the first thing to do is you need to define if you want to use it globally on every element, or if you want to just use it for the title. Okay, let's just select the title, and we want to use a specific typeface for the specific title. Okay, I will go. So what is exactly the title? So this is the each one or heading. I'll select each one, then open the curly braces. And to use a specific typeface, we use font family. And font family is just needs a value, and this value should be a typeface which should be exist already in your machine. And I will go for Georgia. And Georgia, to use decorative lines, which will be considered as a serif font. Okay, save that. And if we take a look here, so the font is changing. It's not like the other one. I can go for another web safe font, and by web safe I mean So there is a font size that exists in all of the operating system or exists in every machine. So if it's something customizable or if it's something that you download in order to start using it. Okay, I'll go for Arial font, which exists in every operating system because there are some fonts, so they are already in your machine. So when you are installing Windows 10 or Mac operating system, and I have some ones. So if I choose Arial, so they are the installed ones. So I need to go to computer and let's just select Arial. So as you see here, so this computer here, when I check that, just give me all of the pre-installed fonts. So I don't install them. They are already there. So I don't have to install all of that. Once I'm using it, it's just this font family. When I put the Arial on the value, it's just check if Arial is already in the system. If I just put another value, so I will have nothing. I will have the default font, which is already applied. Font family is the property, so that define the typeface that you want to use in a specific element. But sometimes you download the font and you can use it as a value of font family. If you give the same document to someone else, it will not render for him because he doesn't have this specific font. You will solve this problem on the next lessons. For the value of font family, it can be wrapped inside double quotes or single quotes. So use wherever you want. You can also stack some other fonts. And by stacking fonts, I mean that you need to tell a browser what fonts to display and the order of these fonts. So for example, okay, let's just write font family again. I will show you that font family. And you see there are multiple stacks. We have this Times New Roman, Times and Serif. And if I'm using the stack right here, it means that this is the first choice and this is the second and this is the type. By doing all of that, just telling the system. So if Times New Roman exists in your system, he will use it. So in terms of performance, it's a good thing. We have multiple ones. Okay, let's just write font family again. And you see here, so I have the Trebuchet, MS, or Lucida Sans Unicode. Sorry for the names, I'm not reading them correctly. If you just take a look here, so they follow the same typeface. So they are all sans serif. So this Arial and all of them, they are sans serif. And for the previous one, so they follow the same typeface, they are serif. So to stack fonts, so you need to put them and you need to put the same category and not different ones. We have a list of elements, and if you want to change the font size of each element, so for example, this paragraph, we want to change the font size and increase it a little bit. So in this case, we need to use a property font size. Okay, this property font size is responsible for changing the font size of a specific element. This font size needs some values, and these values use units. And the units that font size use, we have pixels, we have EM, and we have AVM. We have some other ones, but the most used ones are these ones. Let's just start with the first one, which is PX. So this PX is used for accuracy. For example, if I use a paragraph and I define the font size to 16 pixels, okay, save that. You see nothing changed here because by default, so this browser is using 16 pixels for the paragraph. If I want to just increase the size a little bit by 2 pixels, now I have 18 pixels. So I can just keep increasing that to 20 and nothing wrong here. It's just increasing the size. But the problem is I can't use decimal numbers. If I add a decimal point, then 5, nothing here is changing because this pixel unit needs a whole number instead of a decimal number. When you are using pixels, the size is not affected by the ancestors. So this paragraph, if you are just defining a specific size for this article, let's just go here and define as an example, I will go and use for the article font size 13 pixels, save that. So this paragraph is not affected at all by this ancestor, which is article, which is the parent in our case. Okay, to summarize all of that, when you are using pixel, it needs a whole number instead of a decimal one, which means there is an absolute value and it is not affected by ancestor elements. Let's just move to the next one, which is EM. Okay, I'll copy all of that and put it here inside the EM. Like PX, which is an absolute unit, EM is the relative one, which means that when you are defining a value and use an EM unit, it will relate to the ancestor. So for example, if I go here and I use 1 EM in our case will be 30 pixels. And to be sure that there is 30 pixels, let's just use font size and save it to 30 pixels. Okay, comment that, save that. So you see here, so I have 30 pixels, size is not changing, which means that 1 EM in our case is just taking the value of the ancestor, which is 30 pixels. Okay, let's just remove that and comment out that. So the closest ancestor of paragraph is article, and article is 30 pixels, which means that the paragraph is when I'm using 1 EM is just taking this 30 pixels, which is the closest size of the ancestor. insessor. You can use decimal numbers. If I use 0.5, no, so the size will be half. So if I have 30 pixels here, means that instead of having 30 pixels, 1 EM now will be 15 pixels. And this is what do we have here. Now let's just change the closest insessor. Instead of article, I will wrap the paragraph inside the div. Okay, I'll add the div and just use this paragraph inside the div. Now the closest insessor, instead of article, I have div. Okay, let's just change the div element. I'll just change the font size of this div element to 50 pixels. Pause the video and think of the size of paragraph now in pixels. So the size of this element is 25 pixels. Why? Because the closest insessor to paragraph is div, and the font size of div is 50 pixels. This is what we have here. Paragraph is 0.5 EM, which means that 50 will be divided by 2, which will give us 25 pixels. Okay, let's just do another thing here. I will remove this 25 pixels and I will remove the insessors, and I'm not defining any font size. Okay, what is the font size that will be defined here? By default, 1 EM is equal to 16 pixels. Now, if I'm using 0.5, which means that 16 will be divided by 2, and the result will be 8 pixels. You can even go and use 1.5. The size of 16 pixels will be increased by 1.5. And to summarize all of that, EM is a relative unit, and it is also affected by the closest insessor. We already know that 1 EM in our case, so it just go to the insessor, so the closest insessor, we have 30 pixels, which means that 1 EM is 30 pixels. What if I change this unit to REM? REM is relative to the root element, and the root element is not article in our case. It is HTML. And if I just change in this HTML value or HTML font size to another value, which is, for example, just go for 50 pixels, the result of 1 REM will be 50 pixels and not 30 pixels. No, this one will not be related to a paragraph when we are defining the font size. And if I just use, for example, here 10 pixels, it will just take 10 pixels of the root element. 1 REM in our case is equal to the font size of the root element is 10 pixels. How to control the thickness or boldness of a specific typeface. For example, if you want to change this article title to be lighter, so for that I select first the element, which is each one. Then we have a property which is font weight. And this font weight, so use some specific values. We have values from 100 to 900, which means that we have 100, 200, 300, 400, until 900. And each value is used for the thickness. And the 100 is the thickest one. So which means that there is the lighter one, and the 900, it is the bolder one. Okay? But even if I'm putting here 900, so which means that there is a bolder one, so nothing changed here. Because this bolder and lighter, it depends really on the typeface you are using. Each element has a default font weight value. So for example, for the heading, so the default one is 700, which means that it is bold. Even if you are not defining it here, I'll just remove that. So you see that font weight is set to 700, which is bold. And for the paragraph in our case, it is normal, which means that it's 400, even if you are not defining it from the CSS code. This value is normal and bold can be set directly from the code. So for example, I can go here and set font weight, bold or normal. And for the paragraph, let's just use that. So I can go for font weight, then use bold, which means that here we have a 700 and here we have 400. Okay, let's just remove all of that to return the font to the initial state. Now I will confuse you a little bit. Okay, let's just go to this Google font here, and I will use this Roboto font. Okay, let's just select that, and you select this font, and it will just give me a link that I need to include in the HTML. I just include it here before the style.css. So I'm just including this Roboto font, so in order to start using it. Okay, and tell me here, so in order to use it, so this is the font family that we need to include in the CSS code. And let's just select here the heading. I'll go for the each one, and I want to control this font. So let's just first set the font family. Now we are using font Roboto for this title right here. Now I want to just control the font weight of this element. And as I already said, so the default one here is the font weight here is bold, which means that it is 700. Let's just save that. So nothing changed. But if I go here and I put 100, so the font it is not lighter. So it is the same. Why? Because by default, when you are selecting a font from Google Font, you are just selecting the regular one, which is which is the normal one. And if you see here from customize, you see that I'm selecting here regular 400. Even if I try to control the font weight by a specific number, it will never be lighter or bolder. So to do that, you need to select the font that you want to use. For example, you can select the thin, which is the 100, and the bold, which is 700. And we can also select all of them. It's not a good practice, but in general, I will just select all of them to give you just an idea to control the boldness and the thickness of a specific font. Okay. Now, after I check all of the fonts here, of the styles, so as you see, the length is now a little bit different, so that include all of the font weights. Okay, let's just copy the link again, and I will use it. I'll remove this one and copy the newest one, which include all of the font weights, even for the italic. So you see 100 and 100i, and we'll learn how to use the font style. But in general, we are including all of the styles and also so for the italics. Okay, now let's just go here. The result is thicker. So this is for the 100. And if I go for the 900, you will see the boldest one, which is in our case, if you see here, customize, it is the black 900. Okay, black 900, it is the bolder one. And if we keep decrease the boldness, we're using 800. So you'll see that the boldness is just changing 700, 600, 500, 400, 300, 200 and 100. So the thickest one is 100. And if I go to the normal, it will go for the 400. And if I use bold, so it will go to 700. Okay, this one. Now, there is also another value, which is bolder. So bolder, and we have also lighter. So lighter will go to the extremity, which is 100. And bolder, normally, it should go from the inherited value until, so in our case, it just goes to 700. Okay, so if I put bolder and save the page, you'll see that nothing changed here. So to summarize all of that, the value of font weights depend really on the typeface you are using. So the values that font weight can't use, okay, let's just use them again, from 100 to 900. And we have also normal, bold, lighter, and bolder. So which means that I have also the italic style for each font weight. Now, if to control the font style is straightforward, let's just use font style, and we have three types of values. I have italic, and if I just select here, so I use an italic, which means that let's just use 100. So I have the 100 italic. So I have here this 100i, which means that is already created here after I select the 100 italic here, which means that I can use, when I use the font style, just take the style from the typeface. Okay, now for the normal one, so we can, if you want to just return to the normal one, because sometimes let's just add a specific one that's used by default an italic. I'll use EM. Okay, hello. Now, by default, it is italic, even if I'm not defining the style, and I will use the font family here for the whole page. I will go for body and use the font family for the whole page. Now, the hello is italic by default. And if I want to just return the value of this EM here or emphasize to fonts, I can use font style and italic, which is the default one. But if I just want to return it to the normal style, I just use normal, and you see, and from the result you see here that hello now is returning to normal. And I can also have another value, which is oblique, to use the oblique style. Font style also depends on the typeface you are using. We'll go through some other properties that we can use for text. For this, each one, for example, if I want to align it in the center, so for that, we have a property text align. Okay, I'll select the element first, which is each one. Then I use text align. That takes one value, and this value can be, for example, center. In our case, I want it to be centered. The article tag, it is taking 100% of the document, and this is why it's centered like that. For example, if I just define the article to be 400 pixel or whatever, it will just take the center of the 400 pixel. But in our case, it's just taking the whole page. This is why we have the center like that. And if I just put it in the right, you'll see that it go to the edge of the browser, and I can also use left. We can also add an underline for this title. So for that, I'll use text decoration, And this text decoration still has multiple values. So the first one is overline. So to put an overline, as you see here, we have a line above the title, and we can also use underline to add a line below the title. And we can go add a line through, use a line through. So this is just a line so that across from left to right. We have a link here, and if we want to just remove the text decoration, because by default this link is created by having this style. So the column is different, as also I have an underline. If I want to remove it, I'll just select the A element, then add the text decoration. Okay, text decoration, and use none, which means that I want to just remove it. Now we don't have this underline on this links. And to control the letter casing of a specific element, we have a property text transform, and this property has some values. Let's just take an example of this paragraph. I want to change the first letter to uppercase. So for example, this epsilon will be, so the first I here will be in uppercase. Same for any word within this paragraph. First, I need to select the element paragraph, then use text transform, then I'll use capitalize. So this capitalize will take each first character from each word and just put it in uppercase. And if I want to just use uppercase for the whole paragraph, so I need to use uppercase. Uppercase, now save that. As you see here, the paragraph is in uppercase. And if I want to return to lowercase, now every character is in lowercase. If you want to just return it to its initial state, I can use none. So for example, if text transform is already applied on the paragraph and I want to force that, so I can just use text transform none and it will return to its initial value. Nothing will be applied here. To control the color is straightforward. I'll change the color of the element for the link. I'll use color, so we can use text color. For example, I can use red, or hexadecimal color. I can use DDD, or I can use an RGB form of color, RGB. Let's just use 22, 22, 22, save that. And I can change the color by using any format I want. For the last property, we'll use line H, which controls the space or the H between the two lines. I'll just select this paragraph, the whole one, and I will try to control the H between these two lines by using the property line H. Okay, let's just use line H. And for the values that you can use inside the line H, we have 4 categories: pixels, percentage, RMs, and REMs. And for the last one, you can avoid using unit at all. Okay, let's just use values for each type of units. I will use 12 pixels. And if you take a look here, I have 12 pixels, which is the space between the lines. And if I can increase it to go to 55 pixels, now I have 55 pixels, which is the space between the lines. And I can go and use 1 EM. Don't forget that this line H depends on the font size. So for example, if I just define font size here, go to font size and use 12 pixels. So this 1 EM is related to this 12 pixels. I can use, for example, 1.5 EM, and I can use, let's just go now and use REM, which is related to the HTML tag. If you don't know exactly how to use this units, you can go to the previous lesson when I explained that in details. I can use a number without the unit at all, which means if I want to have a 1.5 half times the size of the font size, in this case, I will use 1.5, save that, and I will have 1.5 the size of the 12 pixels as a space between these two lines. If I increase 16 pixels, and you will have that. And if I want it, for example, 3 times, I will use 3, and now I have 3 times the space, which is related to this font size 16 pixels. We have here 2 elements, the first div and the second one, when each element has some content. And if I refresh the page, you see here that it looks like a one element. I'll add the break line to differentiate between the 2 elements. Now we have 2 separate elements when the second one starts in a new line. The element div by default is considered as a block element. And if we take a look here from the default style, if we check div here or here, we'll see display block by default. And I'm not writing CSS here, it's empty, but this is the defined CSS. By default, it uses display block, which will be considered as a block element. Okay, what define an element to be a block element? So for that, we have begin in a new line. So in our case, we have 2 divs when each div is just displayed in a new line. If I keep adding divs here, just add another one, we'll see that it goes to a new line. Let's just remove that. Block elements can also contain inline elements and not the opposite. Inline elements can't contain block elements, so we'll go through inline elements in this lesson. So for the next one, block elements take 100% of the defined width. So in our case, this 2 divs is just taking 100% of the browser. If I just remove developer tools, you'll see that it's taking 100% and each element go to a new line. If I wrap these 2 divs within a div when I specify the width, I'll go for style and width use 600 pixels. Wrap these two divs within this one, which is considered as a parent. Now it's just taking 600 pixels. If I just use 400 pixels, you'll see that it's taking 400 pixels. Use align styling, style, border. I'll go for 2 pixels, solid red. Copy the style here. Just taking 100% of 400 pixels, which means that we have two elements. Each one has 400 pixels. If I decrease it 200 pixels, it's just taking 100% of the parent in this case, or 100% of the element of the document if you are not defining any width. And for the last one, the height, fit the height of the content, which means that it depends on how much content you have. So if I just keep adding content, let's just copy the same one and use it again. It will just take the height of the content within the block element. If you want to have an idea on the elements that are considered as block level elements, so we have a list here from this URL. Remove that from this URL right here. Address, aside, details, li. So all of these elements, they are considered as block level elements. By default, if we check them from Google Developer Tools, you will see that they use, let's just check div again. So they use display block. All of the rules that are already defined apply on them. Let's just add a paragraph, which is considered also as a block level element. And fake text here. If we take a look here, you see that I have a paragraph from the developer tools. The paragraph here just define that this is display block, which means that this is a block level element. We have here a list of links, which they are considered as align elements. And these are some rules that you have to respect when you are using align element. An align element can't contain a block element, which means that if I add a div within this element, this kind of situation, it is not allowed at all, because this div, if it's considered as a block element and it is not allowed within an align element, in our case, a link. Let's just remove that. Unlike block elements that can start in a new line, align elements can start anywhere in a line. And if we take a look here, they are at the same line. The width and the height of an align element depend on the content. For example, if I add some content within this link, you'll see that the width is changing. Okay, let's just return home. Save that. We can force this align element to be displayed as block element. For that, I'll use the A element and use display property. Then for the value, I use block. Then instead of having the element in a one line, the elements start on a new line. Same for the block elements. In our case, I use divs. So if I want to just force them to be aligned, I'll just select div here, then use display. And instead of block, which is the default one, I use align. Now the elements are aligned in the same line. I have a paragraph here, and to have an idea on how this element will be displaying within this document, we have a tool with the name box model. So each element on our page take up a box of space, which means that this paragraph is just take a box of space, and if I add another one, it will just take another box of space. And to have an idea on that, let's just visit this part from Google Developer Tools. And if I select the paragraph, you'll see the first box, which defined it here. And let's just go for the next one, and this is another box. Box size is affected not only by the width and the height, which is this blue rectangle, but also with the padding, border, and margin. You can select each parameter from the box model. So this is the width and the height. If you select that, you will just highlight the element from the document, and you can go to the padding property if it's not defined in our case. But once you define it from CSS, it will show you this color, and you will see that in a real example. Also for the border, if we have a border within the element, and also for margin. Margin by default is defined for the paragraph. This is what we have here, and this is why once I just select margin here from the box model, so you see this orange from the document, and also you will see an orange right here. Let's just do it again. We have orange for margins. I'll only keep one paragraph, and we'll change all of the values that are within a box model. Let's just start with the width and the height from this blue rectangle. Now we have a 624, which is for the width, and 56, which is for the height. Let's just define that from the style.css and the select paragraph. Then I define for width. I will go, for example, for 400 pixels. For the height, go for 300 pixels. Save that. Now, as you see, the value within the rectangle or the blue rectangle is just changing 400 and the height to 300. Now, if I select this blue rectangle, it will highlight the width and the height of the specific element from the box model. Let's just move now to padding, which will add a buffer space within the element. Okay, for that, I'll go for padding. Then there is multiple ways to define paddings. Let's just define one value, which is 5 pixels. If I go here and check the values that are set, so you see here that we have 5, 5, 5, 5. So this one is for the top, this one is for the right, this one is for the bottom, and this one is for the left. when I define only one value here as a value for the padding, it will define 5 pixels for each side of the element, and it will add a buffer space within the element. Okay, now if I check padding, you see this green box on the element. We can remove this one value and define that separately by using padding top and define it to 5 pixels. Then we'll go for the padding bottom and define it also for the 5 pixels. Same here, left and right. If we check a look here, you see that it is the same. If I remove padding left and the right as an example, you will only see two values, 5 pixels and 5 pixels on the top and the bottom. You can define that separately, but it's not a good thing. You have also another definition, padding. Top is the first one, 5 pixels. The second one is right. Now, for example, if I want to just define 0 at a padding right, for the third one is for the bottom, I go for 5 pixels. For the last one, which is left, I want to just define the value 2 pixels. But once you define 0, you see here I don't have any value. If I just go here and define, for example, 3 pixels, I will have top 5 pixels, whichever is the first one, 3 pixels, whichever is the right here, 5 pixels, whichever is the bottom here, and for the last one, we have 2 pixels, whichever is the left here. To define this value easily, so you have a monitor in front of you, top, right, bottom, and left. Just think of that when you are defining the values. So this is the top of the monitor, and this is the right, this is the bottom, and it's the left. As you see me here using different values, but if you are sure that you have similar value for the top and the bottom and similar value for the left and the right, okay, for that you can use only two values. I'll use 5 pixels, then 10 pixels. And if we take a look here from the box model, you see that I have 5 pixels at the top and the bottom and 10 pixels at the right and the left. We have also the margin property, which is already defined by default from this part right here, this margin. We can define that manually. So for that, I will use, for example, margin. Margin is just the space outside of the element. I will use, for example, 5 pixels. And if we take a look here, the value is changing 5 pixels, 5, 5, and 5. So the same rules that are applied on padding, top, right, bottom, and left. And this is top, right, bottom, left. If I want to just change left and the right to 10 pixels, now I have margins at the right and the left 10 pixels. For the last one, we have border, which is this one. I can define that border 2 pixels solid red, save that. If I select the border, you see that it is selected. If I select margin, it is also selected, padding, and width and height. Okay, let's just remove this height right here. Keep it like that, 400 pixels to see all of them. Now, width and height, padding, border, and margin. You have this possibility to select padding and margin from this part from CSS, padding and margin, without even going to this box model. The more elements you will have within a document, the more complicated it will be to lay out all of the elements within the document. But knowing how to calculate the dimension of each box, it will just help you to accurately predict how elements will lay out on the screen. I'll fix this div width and I want it to be in the center. For that, I'll just select div, then use the width 400 pixels. And I'll use the background of green. Now, I want this element to be at the center. We know that the property margin is responsible for adding space. So we'll use it to move this element to the center by using it. But before that, I need to remove any margin within this document. If you select body, you see that by default, I have a margin 8 pixels here at each edge of the document. I need to remove that. And for that, I will use body, then margin 0 to force this default margin 8 pixels. Save that. Now we don't have any margin. If I select body again, margin it is not defined at all, which means 0. To center this element in this document, we need to do a calculation. We have a free space that needs to be distributed in the left and the right. Okay, this calculation means that we have a div that has 400 pixels and we have a body which has 640 pixels. How I know that? Div, I already defined it here, 400 pixels. If we check the element body, you see that I have 640. To calculate the free space is equal to body minus div. Is equal to the element of the whole document here minus the width of the div. Okay, which means 240 pixels. To distribute this 240 pixels for both edges, so we need to use margin left and margin right, and we need to divide this 240 pixels by 2. Okay, let's just do that. So we have 240 pixels as the free space, which needs to be distributed in the left and the right of this element. So for that, I will use margin left 120 pixels. Okay, and same for the margin right, and save that. The element now is centered, but will deceive you a little bit. What if I just put this page in a full screen? No, the element is not centered. Why? Because we do a calculation of 640 minus 400 pixels. Now this value is changing. Body is not 640, which means that the free space will not be the same. This 120 on the left and the right will change. But you don't have to do that manually. We need a value which will define that automatically. Okay, let's just select the div here. And from the box model, we have this 120 pixel at the left and the right. And there is a value that can be used, which is auto. So which will be auto at the left and auto at the right. Okay, let's just move to the code. Instead of 120 pixels, I'll use auto, save that. And now the element is centered, even if I keep changing the size. If we click on computed here, you'll see that this margin left and margin right, they are calculated automatically. I'm not defining this 289. I'm just defining auto at margin left and margin right. And this is what the calculation is doing. So auto will calculate all of that automatically. Now let's just simplify the code a little bit. So instead of using margin left and margin right, okay, let's just comment that. We'll use margin 0 for the top and the bottom and auto for the left and the right. Save that, and we have the same result. Now we'll go through another use case when we'll use negative value for the margin property. So from the code, we have two divs, element 1 and element 2. And from the CSS code, I just defined the width globally for any div within this document to 300 pixels. Then I just changed the background for element 1 and element 2 to be different. What do I want to achieve is just to move this element 2 to the top of element 1 by 10 pixels. Okay, if I use margin top, 10 pixel, it will just go to the bottom, which means that I need, instead of using a positive value, using a negative value. Now the element 2 is at the top of element 1. We move by 10 pixels. If you want to just go by 60 pixels, now the element will just move to the top of the other element. We have a document here that have a div wrapping an image in the paragraph. And today we'll learn how to use a property, which is float, that will help us to positioning and formatting content. For example, I want to just align this image at the left of this paragraph. Before we do that, I'm sure that most of you are just thinking why we should learn float. We have no Flexbox module, we have grid systems. Why we should learn how to use float? To be honest, float is not meant to be used as a layout property because it is just a hacky way to lay out elements by using it. In general, if you are dealing with a situation like that, you have an image and a paragraph and you want to just keep it simple, so you can use a float property. So this is why learning a CSS property can be sometimes useful, so depending on the use case you are dealing with. Okay, enough of talking, let's just code. Let's just use the image selector from CSS. So we'll use image, then use float and left. As you see here, the element is just floating at the left of the paragraph. And if you want to float it to the right, we'll use right value. When you are using right or left, you are just floating the element to the left of its container. So the container of image is the div. We are just loading the element to the left of the div. We have also another value, which is none, which disallows the element to float. Okay, let's just return the left value. But there is a problem here that you don't see it. And to see the problem, I will use a border for the container div, which will wrap all of the elements, border 2 pixel solid red. Let's just define the problem. I'm using this border 2 pixel solid red on the div container. This image is not fitting the div. We should have a border which will wrap everything. But why we're having this problem? Because the image height is larger than the paragraph height. And to deal with this kind of problem, you have two solutions. So the first one is by using the property overflow auto. So just consider that as a clear fix. Or for example, you can just take this overflow auto and let's just create a new class selector. We'll go for clear fix, add this overflow auto, and let's just add this class within the div class and as a value clear fix, save that. So this is the first solution. The solution is used when an element is taller than its container and if it's floated and it will overflow outside of the container. Okay, let's just define a comment here. First solution. I'll comment that and create the second solution. And for the second solution, we'll create another selector clear fix, which will include a clear property that specify what element can float beside the cleared element and on which side. For that, add the class clear fix. Then the content property, add an empty content. Then I'll use the display. Then I'll use the display table plus clear property, and I will clear both sides, left and the right. Save that. Now I will not have this problem. Even if I duplicate or I copy this graphics or copy this div and save it again, I will not have any problem. Once I will have problem, I will just add this class ClearFix and it will control this kind of problems. This is not the cleanest way to write CSS, and we are just creating here a hacky CSS in order to control a problem. If you want a layout element, avoid using float in complex layout in general. And I just create some lessons about Flexbox module and how to use that in order to create layouts.